I want to thank Thad for making me follow that. This is the only slide I'm going to read at you. Using your brain and your heart to kick butt figuratively instead of literally. That's what we're going to talk about today. And to start it off, I'd like to get a little audience participation. If you would share with me what you think qualities of a great leader are. Just shout them out and I'll write them up here. We don't need a mic because I'll just write them up here. Discipline.
Listening.
Discipline. I got to be able to write faster. Listening. Confidence.
Empathy.
I'm sorry, what?
Empathy.
Compassion. Empathy, you said, I think.
Someone also said inspiring.
Okay, empathy.
Flexible.
Inspiring.
Trustworthy.
What was the one over here?
Flexible.
Flexible. I got that.
Somebody said vision.
Flexible. Vision. Trustworthy. And we'll cut it off there, just since we're about to run out of paper. So, a good leader should have all of those things, right? Does it matter where you are on the org chart to determine whether or not you're a leader? If you're at the top, your leadership, all of these people work for you. Is that where you want me? Yeah. That's where, if you're at the top, you should have those qualities because you're a leader. But what if you're down here? What if you're at the bottom of the org chart? Are these still important qualities for you to have? And what if, like me, you don't have an org chart? And Brian? I mean, certainly we hire contract workers, but essentially, you know, I'm a leader all by myself. So when you think about whether or not it's important for you to have leadership skills, of course it is, because no matter what position you are in the org chart or no org chart at all, you're a leader. So with that, this information is valuable to you because you're all leaders. And leadership involves emotional intelligence. Here, who's familiar with emotional intelligence or EQ? Raise hands, a lot of hands going up out there. Here is the definition of emotional intelligence. It's a set of emotional and social skills that influence the way we perceive and express ourselves, the way we develop and maintain relationships, the way we cope with challenges, and the way we use emotional information in a meaningful way. So I have a question for you. What do you think, there's a difference between average leaders and superior leaders, and it's attributable to emotional intelligence. What do you think that percentage is? You can be a leader, you can be an average leader, or you can be a superior leader. What is the difference? Mark, what do you think? 5%. Anybody else? 20%. Anybody else? 1%. The difference is 90%. You want to be a superior leader, 90% of your skill is your emotional intelligence, not your IQ, not how well you know your job. It's your level of emotional intelligence. Here's an interesting fact. Your IQ, which is your ability to, it's your intellectual intelligence, it's your ability to learn and so on, that peaks at age 17. Now, it doesn't mean that you stop learning at age 17, but that's essentially the number that you get on a test, it peaks at age 17. And you can still learn, it's your capacity to learn, is what it's measuring. Your EQ, however, peaks at age 40. So, who's under that in here? I know there's got to be a few. Stop it, Les. But here's the most exciting thing about that. It peaks at 40, but it doesn't stop there unless you want it to. You can continue, your IQ is kind of set. Your EQ, you can continue to expand as long as you want to. And we're going to talk about how you can do that in just a little bit. But before I do that, I want to talk to you about, one, The primary assessment there's a lot of assessments that will assess EQ out there, but the primary assessment that was done by the primary scientists behind emotional intelligence is called the EQI 2.0. So that's certainly one way that you can assess your emotional intelligence, and I'm going to go through a little bit of that today, but whether you use it or not, the information I'm going to share with you will give you the data so that you can look inside yourself and see where you might need to make some changes. The first thing that we look at is the EQI 2.0 model. Pretty fancy. This thing in the center is kind of like your IQ score. It's your emotional intelligence score, which is great. You know, I mean, you might be 5, it might be 120, whatever it could be, but it's your emotional intelligence score, and it's a fine number to know. Not a whole lot of great cocktail party conversation, but it's about 10,000 feet. As you move down, you'll look at these subscales. Let me go back here. When you see around the edge, you see self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. Those are called realms or areas. And I want to walk really quickly through each one of these areas or realms, because when you are looking at your emotional intelligence, it's not just about, oh, how do I come across to people, or do I understand myself? It's measuring you in 15 different ways. It's looking at 15 different aspects of your emotion and seeing where you stand. So I'll just run through these quickly, and then I'll go through them again a little bit later when we can talk about things you might be able to do to make changes. First is the self-perception. What that's measuring is your self-regard, what you think of yourself, self-actualization, how far you're getting up that Maslow's hierarchy, and your emotional self-awareness. Do you understand your own emotions? The second realm or area is self-expression. So that's your emotional expression. How well do you express yourself? How assertive are you? And how independent are you? Are you reliant on other people to make decisions? Or do you feel pretty confident in your independence? Next, your interpersonal relationships. What's your level of empathy for your fellow man or for yourself? And social responsibility. How responsible do you feel to contribute back to society in a meaningful way? Being in this room today is social responsibility. It's sharing your gifts with other people. It's making connections with other people. How much a part of your being is that? Third, decision making. Some people are a little bit surprised that this is part of emotional intelligence, but it's a big part. Obviously, it's an equal part to the other 4. So problem solving, how good are you at it? How comfortable are you? Reality testing, how well do you perceive that what's reality actually is? And impulse control. I have a story about this one a little bit later that involves me. My story does not involve my behavior when eating one Thin Mint and never stopping until the entire sleeve is gone. But that is a part of my impulse control problem. And the final realm and the subscales are flexibility. How flexible are you? How well do you bounce back? Stress tolerance. Are you a bundle of nerves, or are you able to kind of handle what comes at you? And optimism. Are you an optimist, or is that something that you could work on? On the outside of this entire model, you see, it's a little bit hard to read there. And see, here I go. But it is your well-being score. And it doesn't really have anything to do with your emotional intelligence score, but it does combine 4 different subscales to tell you how are you doing with well-being and how happy are you. And it's a fascinating number to get, not because you're stuck there, but because if you see something in there that you think, well, you know, if I did something just a little bit differently here or there, I could raise that. I could raise my well-being score. And it's not just a matter of getting a better score, it's about affecting what's happening with you inside. And I had an arrow to show you that. Fancy, fancy, fancy with my PowerPoint. All right. This picture here is your brain. I want to talk about how we make these changes. If you were in your truck and you were driving through this field, you could let go of the wheel, and chances are you're going to go right down this path. Your tires are going to sit right in those ruts, And you're going to go right down that path, and it's going to get you to whatever you wanted to get to at the end. But what if you want to go somewhere else? What you're going to need to do is steer the truck out of those ruts, and at least for some period of time, you're going to need to hold on to the wheel, because as soon as you let go of the wheel, it's going to veer right back into those ruts. That's just like your brain. The way you do things all the time are the neural pathways that you've already created. You want new neural pathways, you can get them anytime you want. You just have to hold the steering wheel in a different position. So in the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about the things that you can do in each one of those areas in a very short way. I wish I could give you an example for all 15 of them, not time to do that. But in this one, for instance, if you have been told that you don't, and maybe people might not use this word, but you're not very emotionally self-aware, you don't really understand what's going on with yourself, or if you have a lot of physical issues, like you have stomach aches and you can't sleep, it might be that you simply aren't aware of the emotions that are affecting you. And that might be one of those areas that you want to work on. In the self-expression, maybe you don't know how to say no. Maybe no matter what someone comes and says to you, asks you to do, you say yes. Your assertiveness score might be able to use a boost. And so you can do things to practice being more assertive in a kind and collaborative way, but so that it more positively affects your outcomes. In this one, how are you with your interpersonal relationships? If you don't have any friends, then this might be a low score for you, maybe. The next one, I will tell you this story. This is where mine comes in, but when I first took this test, it was probably about a year ago, I had a very low impulse, not very low, I had a low impulse control score, but the truth was I wasn't really surprised. I knew it. And one of the things that I realized was I had very low impulse control when I am confronted by a certain kind of person. Generally, they are arrogant, patronizing, and unkind. And instead of just being able to walk away at the time or handle it in a more productive way, it would get me really, really, really upset. So that I would have to leave in a rush. I remember one time sitting in my car for half an hour trying to come down from just the pure anger and frustration of having to deal with this person. I decided that wasn't really going to work, because you can't, if you can avoid those kind of people, but you're not going to always be able to do that. So I worked on it. I figured out what's triggering me about people like this. What is it that really gets to me about people like this? And when I see it coming, what am I going to do? How am I going to behave? Where do I feel it in my body when it's coming? And what will I do? So I worked for several months. I was in a position where I was going to run into this person occasionally, so it was a great practice. They did not know it. They are not in this room. But I was able to practice what it felt like when that emotion was coming on, and I was able to do things differently. When I got certified in this, I needed to take another test, and my score went way up on impulse control. I still do not stop eating at one Thin Mint, but nobody's perfect. The final, with flexibility, stress tolerance, optimism, how well do you handle stress? Are you just a basket case? And there are skills, there are practices that you can do to get better at that, starting with breathing. When you're completely stressed, slow down, stop, and breathe. In closing, as we saw there before, EQ is far and away a more accurate predictor of your success than is IQ. Far and away. And the coolest thing about it, the power's in your hands. Questions? Do I have time for questions, or was that for the 5 minutes for questions? Any questions? Bueller? Yes?
How long does the test take?
The test takes about 12 minutes, something like that. Other questions?
Can you just go online somewhere and download the test, or what you got to do to actually?
There are online tests that you can do for free, and crazy as it happens, I am certified in this, and you could do it through me. And there are flyers on the tables if you're interested. I'm offering a fantastic discount to E4E attendees today, but if you want to do it, it's not something that you do and you put in a drawer. It's something that you look at and you continue to go back to it with your self-development plan to just get better all the time. Mark?
What section do you see that most people need improvement on in general?
There really is no one section that most people need improvement on. Everyone is different. And it's not even a big difference between men and women. We can pull things out by country, by gender, all those kind of things. It's not, and one of the things I think may be interesting is that men that are interested in taking this might already be pretty good in some areas because they recognize the value of emotional intelligence. So that could be something that sways that. Right?
What's the lowest score you've ever seen?
You want to know my impulse control score, don't you?
I'm curious if they were a lawyer or not.
You know, I haven't seen. I've seen some, depending upon the scale, where they might be in, the 50s or the 40s, and generally they know it. When they look at the score, like, oh yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. Les?
Mary, can you do this with teams, like 6, 8, 10 folks? where
You
they
certainly
all
can.
take that and we do some kind of workshop around it?
Check is in the mail. I'm also certified in 360s. So yeah, you can actually do it as a team, and it is really a cool thing when you get an entire department or organization who's on board with this, recognizing that it's how you interact with each other that's going to affect your well-being and your happiness. And I mean, if we're not expected to be happy at work, how crazy is that? Dan.
Fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
And it came to my attention that so much of what you discussed there fits very nicely with the Great Wellness Plan in general. Just it's very apparent to me that this concept, when you're following these processes, really puts you in a place that wellness is very supportive.
Yeah, he was saying that it's a concept that really aligns with wellness, and I completely agree, because if your stress tolerance is low, or if you don't have interpersonal relationships, all of those things are going to affect your health. I mean, if there's studies that show that. So these are very connected to your physical self as well. Bill?
Mary, based on your experience, if I'm not achieving my potential, or I feel like my business isn't achieving my potential, what's the likelihood that somehow my EQ is affecting that based on your experience?
I would say it's highly likely. Often people don't understand, they just don't see how they're coming across to other people. Particularly, sometimes people who are in job search situations, or even in sales situations, if they're not having success, they may not realize that their self-expression is standing in the way. And it's again, the cool thing about it is it doesn't have to be that way. So I truly believe that what is often standing in your way, sometimes it's technical knowledge, but very often it's EQ.
The reason why I ask is my experience has been that people tend to get self-critical of themselves if they aren't achieving their potential, and frequently they're criticizing themselves for the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because they're really looking at it from a superficial standpoint, when really it's got a lot more to do with their emotional intelligence than the things that might be obvious to them.
That's a really good point. And when you can drill down with those 15 subscales, what's really cool is it's not just like, oh, my emotional intelligence sucks. It's what area is it that's drawing you down and affecting you? Because it's not really about raising your score. The raising your score is just an outward sign that you have developed better skills in that area. So if it's going to help you, and if it's really going to see where is that particular area, because maybe with decision making, you're really good. You really do see things as they are, and you really have good impulse control. But maybe your problem solving just isn't really where it should be. So then you can hone in on that one thing. Josh, do you have one?
Is the scale similar to IQ, and is there like the equivalent of Mensa for those hyper EQ scores?
You know, I suppose that there are people who would be. I'm doing this because when you get your assessment, there's a bar chart, and that are high all the way across. Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah. I mean, especially when you think about, I've never seen one so far.
But like you said, the low score is 50, is that equivalent to like an IQ of?
Well, and when I say 50, I'm looking at one particular subscale. If someone's entire EQ was 50, that would probably be beyond my pay grade. I mean, you know, they might, you know, that whole dysfunctional, neurotic, psychotic, pathological, I mean, it might be somewhere up there that I'm not trained to do. But certainly you can see, you can find people who are in a particular subscale who are very high, and maybe some people are very high across the board because sometimes it's either natural to them or they've worked at it. They've decided that this is the thing that's holding me back as a leader in my organization. And how many people have worked for a boss that stinks? I mean, that's why I started my own business. I was so tired of working for bad bosses. So Mark has given me the 0 sign, but thank you so much, and really appreciate your attention.